In the next 10 years, AI, digital currencies, and new trade policies will completely reshape finance. Are you ready?
Okay, so you've sent in some really interesting stuff about the future of finance,
Yeah.
specifically looking at, the next 10 years or so, from 2025 to 2035.
Right.
And I think this is really, I think this is going to be a good one because we're going to try to distill uh, the key takeaways for the listener,
Absolutely.
as opposed to just, reading the whole report, which
Yeah.
is time consuming.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to try to figure out,
Yeah.
what are the big shifts, what are the big opportunities, and what are the potential challenges?
Yeah. And how is it all going to affect,
Right.
the listener
Right. How is it going to affect their lives and
and their finances, right?
yeah, the finances?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first thing that struck me when I was looking at the materials
Mhm.
was how much international trade policies and the global market
Right.
really impact financial development.
Absolutely. And how connected those two are.
Yeah.
It's one of the sort of, I think, overarching themes here.
Right.
That everything is intertwined.
Right.
So, we can't just be talking about finance in a vacuum.
Right.
It has to be in the context of,
Yeah.
the global trade landscape, right?
Right. And so let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah.
It seems like we're seeing kind of two trends
Yeah.
happening at the same time.
Yeah.
There's this move towards protectionism,
Yeah.
in some of the major economies.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, we're
yeah.
seeing these new generation trade agreements.
Exactly.
So let's break that down for the listener.
Sure. So you've got this, it's been a trend towards protectionism,
Right.
which really means, countries putting up more obstacles to financial firms trying to do business across borders.
Okay.
And that's going to have implications for everything from lending
Right.
to investment flows.
Right.
But at the same time, you have these new generation trade agreement like the CPTPP and the RCEP,
Right.
which are boosting investment and financial cooperation
Okay.
among their member countries.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah. So it sounds like in some ways
Yeah.
it's getting harder,
Yeah.
but in some ways it's
getting easier, right?
getting easier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's just different.
It's more nuanced, I think.
Yeah. It's nuanced.
Than just saying like, oh, globalization is increasing or decreasing.
Right.
It's more like it's shifting.
Right.
It's morphing into something different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about that too is how the material highlights how things like tariff policies and exchange rates
Oh yeah.
can really, in real time
Right.
affect things like capital flow and even how commercial banks operate.
Yeah, because if tariffs suddenly go up
Yeah.
on certain goods, that can impact
Yeah.
businesses' ability to import or export.
Yeah.
And that's going to have a ripple effect on their finances
Yeah.
and on the banks that they work with.
Right.
And then exchange rates.
Yeah.
If a currency fluctuates wildly, that can make it really difficult for companies to plan and invest.
Right.
So it creates a lot of uncertainty
Yeah.
in the system.
So basically, financial institutions need to be really
They have to be agile.
agile. Yeah, they have to be able to adapt quickly
Right.
to these changes.
Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
And talk
ahead.
about fintech.
All right.
I mean-
The fintech revolution, right?
Our fintech revolution.
Yeah.
It's happening.
I mean, it's been happening for a while, but
Right.
it's really accelerating.
Yeah. And it feels like AI is one of the
Oh, yeah.
really big drivers of that.
Huge.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the most exciting areas, I think, is
Right.
how AI is being used to analyze financial data.
Right.
And it's not just about analyzing it faster.
Right. It's about analyzing it in ways that we couldn't before.
Okay.
So, for example, there's this technique called graph neural networks,
Okay.
which is really good at identifying complex patterns
Okay.
in financial transactions.
Okay.
So think about fraud detection.
Right.
Traditional systems are kind of rule-based.
Yeah.
So they're looking for very specific things.
Right.
But graph neural networks can learn from the data itself
Right.
and identify patterns that we might not even be aware of.
Okay.
So that's going to lead to much more sophisticated fraud detection.
Wow. So it can kind of like see things that
You can see connections that we can't.
can't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And for the listener, that means, more secure transactions,
Yeah.
potentially more tailored investment recommendations
Mhm.
because AI can analyze huge amounts of data
Right.
and find opportunities that we might miss.
Okay. And then there's this other thing
Yeah.
that feels like it could really change things.
Yeah.
And that's CBDCs?
CBDCs, yeah, Central Bank Digital Currencies.
Central Bank Digital Currencies.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But it's a really important concept.
So explain that to the listener.
Yeah. So basically, why should we care about that?
Right. So basically, it's the idea that central banks could issue their own digital currencies.
Okay.
So instead of just having physical cash or commercial bank money, you would have a direct digital form of a country's currency.
Okay.
And that could have huge implications for how we hold and transfer money.
Yeah.
It could potentially disintermediate commercial banks to some extent.
Right.
So it's a really big deal.
So it's like our digital wallets would have a...
Yeah, it's like having a direct connection to the central bank.
A connection to the central bank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's a really big shift that could happen.
Okay. And then another trend that's happening.
Yeah. Alongside that is open banking.
Right. Open banking. Yeah.
So what's...
Yeah. So open banking is basically this idea that you can allow different financial service providers to access your financial data, but with your consent. Okay. So it's not like they could just take it.
Yeah.
You have to give them permission.
Right. Yeah.
And it's done through these standardized digital interfaces called APIs.
Right.
And the idea is that it can lead to more competition, more innovation, more personalized services.
Okay.
So, for example, you could have an app that aggregates all your financial information from different accounts.
Okay.
Or you could have an app that automatically finds you the best deals on loans or insurance.
Okay, so that sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah.
But there's a catch.
Right. Yeah, what's the catch?
The catch is security.
Right.
If you're sharing all this data, you have to make sure it's secure.
Right.
So that's a big challenge.
So it's like a trade-off.
It is a trade-off.
Between convenience and security.
Yeah, convenience versus security.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder, as all this stuff becomes more interconnected, how do we ensure that the data is protected?
Right. Yeah. It's a big question.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Okay, so let's move on to the customer.
Okay.
Because ultimately, all these changes are affecting the end user.
The end user, the customer.
The customer, right. So what are some of the trends?
Well, I think one of the big trends is the demand for personalized financial services.
Okay.
People are used to getting personalized experiences in other areas of their lives.
Right.
Like with shopping and entertainment.
Yeah, like Amazon knows what I want before I want it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now they expect the same thing from their financial institutions.
Right.
So that means, more tailored investment advice.
Yeah.
Insurance policies that adapt to their changing circumstances.
Right.
It's a move away from these kind of one-size-fits-all financial products.
Right. And it makes sense because everybody's financial situation
everyone's different.
Is different.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And then another trend that's happening is this growing emphasis on ESG.
Right. ESG, environmental social governance.
Yeah. Environmental, social, and governance.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for finance?
Well, it's having a big impact on investment decisions.
Okay.
Investors are increasingly looking at the broader impact of their investments.
Right.
So not just the financial returns, but also the environmental and social impact of the companies they're investing in.
Okay.
So, for example, they might favor companies with strong records on carbon emissions or companies that are involved in renewable energy. And so that's pushing financial institutions to offer more sustainable investment options.
Okay. So it's like people are trying to align their investments.
Exactly.
Their values.
Yeah. Align your money with your values.
Yeah.
It's a growing trend.
And then another thing we have to talk about is cross-border e-commerce.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
it's huge.
It's exploding.
And it's only getting bigger.
Yeah.
Right?
So what are the implications of that?
Well, it's creating a huge demand for more efficient international payment solutions.
Right.
If you're a small business selling products online to customers overseas, you need to be able to receive payments quickly and easily without incurring huge fees.
Right.
So that's putting pressure on traditional banking systems to modernize.
Oh, well, so we've talked about all these opportunities, but let's talk about some of the challenges.
I mean, the challenges,
I mean, there are definitely some challenges.
There are definitely some challenges.
Yeah.
So one of the big ones is market fluctuations.
Okay.
Right?
So,
we've got inflation.
Right.
Which is still a concern.
Uh-huh.
And we've got central banks trying to manage monetary policy through interest rate adjustments.
Right.
And so that creates a lot of uncertainty for financial institutions.
Yeah, because if interest rates go up, suddenly
Yeah.
that can really affect...
It can make borrowing more expensive.
Yeah.
It can decrease the value of investments.
Right.
So it's a big challenge.
And then there's just this broader sense of potential financial instability.
Right.
You know?
I mean, the world is a pretty volatile place right now.
It is.
You know, we've got geopolitical tensions. We've got economic uncertainty.
Yeah.
So that creates a lot of risk for the financial system.
And then on top of all that, you've got increased competition. I mean, you've got these new players coming in.
You got the digital banks.
Yeah.
You get the fintech companies.
Right.
And they're often, you know, more agile, more innovative, lower operating costs.
Right.
So they're putting pressure on the traditional banks.
Yeah. And then you also have...
And then you have big tech.
Big tech.
Right.
Right. You know, companies like...
Google, Apple, Amazon.
Google, Apple, Amazon.
Facebook.
Right.
They're all getting into finance.
It's all getting into finance.
Yeah, so that's a whole other level.
A whole other level of competition.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so it sounds a little bit scary.
Yeah, it can be a bit daunting.
Yeah.
But there are also opportunities.
Okay. Let's talk about the opportunities.
Okay.
So what are some of the opportunities?
Well, one of the big ones, I think, is this idea of hybrid banking.
Okay.
So it's not about, you know, digital replacing traditional.
Right.
It's about finding ways to combine them. Okay.
So, you know, traditional banks have this physical presence. They have established customer relationships.
Right.
But they can also learn from the digital banks.
Right.
And adopt some of their technologies and innovations.
Okay.
So that can lead to a more efficient, more customer-centric banking experience.
Oh, okay.
So
basically the best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the material also talks about the advantages of investing in certain technologies.
Right.
Like
AI, blockchain, big data.
Yeah, AI, blockchain, big data.
Yeah.
So how can those be used?
Well, AI, we already talked about.
Right.
You know, for things like fraud detection and personalized services.
Yeah.
Blockchain can be used to enhance security and transparency in transactions.
Okay.
And big data can be used to improve risk assessment and customer understanding.
Right.
So they're all really powerful tools that can transform the financial industry.
And then another opportunity is partnerships.
Partnerships, right?
Yeah, you know.
Between traditional banks and fintechs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really exciting area because, you know, you've got these established players with their resources and expertise, and you've got these startups with their agility and innovation.
Right.
So when they come together,
that
can create some really powerful synergies.
Yeah. So how can financial institutions, you know, adapt to all these changes?
Right.
What are some specific things they can do?
Well, I think one of the key things is to restructure their business models.
Okay.
So instead of just offering, you know, siloed products and services, they need to create these integrated digital financial ecosystems.
Okay.
So it's like a one-stop shop for all your financial needs.
Okay.
Right.
So it's like a platform.
It's a platform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another thing they need to do is strengthen their data analysis capability.
Right.
I mean, we talked about...
Data is key.
Data is key.
Yeah, data is the new oil.
Yeah.
So they need to use AI and machine learning to understand their customers better.
Right.
And to personalize their products and services.
And then they also need to embrace sustainable banking.
Sustainable banking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's not just a nice to have anymore.
Right.
It's a must have.
It's a must have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's risk management.
Risk management, always important.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, with all these changes and new technologies, the risks are also evolving.
Right.
So they need to use big data to improve their risk assessment.
Okay.
They need to optimize their capital management to ensure liquidity.
Okay.
So it's a really important area.
Yeah, so basically they need to be really proactive.
Proactive.
Yeah. Okay, and then finally there's the human element.
Right, the people.
Yeah.
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 You know, they need to invest in their employees, give them the skills they need for this digital age.
Right.
And they need to foster a culture of innovation.
Okay.
So that means encouraging experimentation, new ideas, embracing change.
Okay, so just to wrap things up for our listener.
Right.
I think it's clear that the financial sector over the next 10 years
the next decade
is going to be
really dynamic.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
It's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
But it's also going to be full of opportunity.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's really about, being adaptable.
Adaptability is key.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being willing to embrace new technologies, to learn new things.
Yeah.
And to really think about how you can add value in this new environment. Yeah. And I think one thing that's really interesting that we didn't really touch on is how all these changes are going to affect financial inclusion.
Right.
Yeah.
Financial inclusion is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we make sure?
Yeah. How do we make sure that everyone has access to these new financial products and services?
Right.
How do we bridge the digital divide?
Right.
So that's something I think we need to think about.
Yeah, it's definitely something for the listener to consider.
Yeah, definitely something to ponder.
As we move into this new era.
Absolutely, the future of finance.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be alive.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think more trade barriers are good or bad for the economy? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to stay ahead in finance, like, comment, share and subscribe now.